Okay, off to another rebuild. What we have in front of us today is parts that I managed to obtain from all over the place, most of it from Japan. And what we have here is a OS 12 CVX engine from, I believe, 1994. And we're going to be putting it back together with all new parts. All the parts you see are all brand new, including the cylinder head, the block, piston, and sleeve, etc. So what we're going to do is we're going to get to cleaning some of the parts. Some of the things you're going to need is 99% rubbing alcohol, brake cleaner, after an oil, castor oil, a torch, etc. So even though these are new parts, we will be installing the crankshaft and bearings soon. They are just hanging out in the freezer behind me at the moment. We want to clean out all these parts because you don't know how long they've been sitting for, if there's any kind of oxidation on them. You know, it's just good practice, right? See, there's some stuff on there. Okay, so we got the connecting rod, we have the wrist pin here. This is a puck style wrist pin, so it doesn't use any clips. It just uses little Teflon sliders like a lot of airplane engines do. So we're going to assemble the piston and connecting rod. We know which way everything goes. The sleeve goes this way in the block. The exhaust port lines up with the exhaust port. The hole in the piston here goes to the other side of the block. So we're going to use, because this engine is going to be sitting for a while, so I'm not going to use castor oil because it can get sticky. We're going to apply some after an oil. And we want to make sure our connecting rod, there's a tapered side to it. The tapered side faces in towards the crankshaft. We want to put a dab of oil in there. Never put engine parts together dry, ever. It's just not cool. So let me slide our pin through our piston. All these parts are very tightly machined, so they might not go together. Well, they'll go together fine, but they might be a little bit tricky to get everything lined up. Okay, so our piston is ready to go, like so. And always remember, when you're rebuilding engines of any kind, never to rush. Always take your time. That's very important, because as soon as you start rushing is when things are going to go wrong for you in a big way. We have our brand new crankcase. Factory, new old stock part. Probably been sitting 20 years somewhere in Japan, so OS engines are made in Osaka, Japan. And that's where I believe it came from, or half the parts came from Tokyo, Japan as well. So we're going to apply some after-run oil in the bearing journal, a little bit more in the bore of the block, some in the front, because the next step is really critical and you have to be super careful. And some of you might cringe at what I'm about to do. Please don't. The reason I say that is because this is how I've redone engines. A lot of engines this way. I've never had a problem, never had anything go wrong. So as long as you use a little bit of common sense, everything should go just fine. We have a torch, and we're going to start heating up the engine. Like I said, the crankshaft and the bearings are both in the freezer behind me at the moment, chilling, cooling, so they will shrink. And as long as you're careful, and like I said before, use common sense, you can heat this engine up to expand the casting. I don't know if you guys are getting that in frame. Hopefully nobody calls me, because that would be freaking annoying. Anyway. So the bearings are from OS. All the parts here are OS. Even the glow plug is from OS. And these screws from OS. Everything is from OS. I managed to find this block for a really good price. It was very cheap. The piston and sleeve I got from a friend of mine. Most of the other stuff I kind of sourced at the hobby shop of new old stock parts and other things like that. So we're just going to continue to keep the heat flowing. I don't have a temperature gun, but I've done this so many times I don't need one. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, have your hobby shop do it for you, or someone that you know that knows what they're doing, because if you screw this up and you bake your engine block, you're not going to be happy with yourself. We're going to be using the crankshaft as a bearing guide tool. We're going to install the front bearing first, the rear bearing after. Hopefully all goes well on camera. Okay, just going to try to keep the heat there for a second while I get ready. Try not to let things get too hot, out of control here. Okay, got our bearings. Front bearing goes first, rear bearing goes last. Okay, got our front bearing in. If I can get it out, I'll be doing perfect. And then if there's enough heat, the rear bearing goes right in like that. See? That wasn't so hard, was it? That's that part over. Now we're just going to let everything chill out for a few minutes. Don't use water to quench your engines down, because that can warp the cases by cooling it too quick. Yeah, so just never do that. That's just NFG. And if you don't know what NFG stands for, excuse my language, but it stands for no fucking good. And you don't want to do that, so. Next, we're going to get out all our other parts here. We got factory new screws. OS uses to like kind of a softer metal for some reason with their screws. So we have our back plate right here. We have our one-way starter shaft right here, which we're going to apply some oil to. Sometimes there's a shim for these, sometimes there's not. Just put a little bit of oil on there. Doesn't have to be a lot, just enough to keep everything kind of coated, because these are steel parts and they will rust. And that goes in like so. Next, you want to remember your paper gasket. Very important, because if you don't have one, your engine will have a vacuum leak. So we're going to apply the gasket carefully without tearing it, because that would be a piss off and a half. And there's no special tools needed. I mean, people have said, oh, why don't you get a bearing puller installer tool? Honestly, I don't like them. I've used one before, and it seems that it applies too much thrust to the inside of the bearing, which is just, I don't like it, so I don't use them. And I'm not spending $200 Canadian for one either. Frig that. That's just too damn expensive for this cowboy. Okay, so we got this guy together. This guy is somewhat still hot as frig to the touch. I'll wipe up the excess oil. Make sure everything turns free. There's no binding. You can see in there, everything's turning free. There's no binding. The bearings feel perfect, nice and smooth. Everything's beautiful. Okay, oops. Still a little bit on the warm side. All right. What am I missing here? I think that's... yeah, it's the rotating assembly pretty well put together. Next, we can focus on the piston and sleeve, which is here. This sleeve, I've already cleaned it with non-chlorinated brake clean. Be careful, because chlorinated brake clean can damage small parts, especially parts that are made out of plastic and rubber. Keep that in mind. Always non-chlorinated. It takes all the oil and grease and varnish with it. Okay, so we're going to next apply some oil to our crank pin. Very important, because these are high stressed parts. Apply some oil there. Apply some oil in the wrist pin area, because you just should. Apply some oil to the inside of your sleeve, as well as the outside, to help it go in. You can use castor oil. I have castor oil off to my right. I'm not using that today because, like I said, this engine's going to be sitting in long-term storage until it's ready to be used. So we're going to just take one look at our piston again here. Just for good measure, we're going to just clean it off with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, which has been distilled to its finest purity by myself. I'm not going to tell you or show you how I did that, because it's probably illegal where you live, and probably illegal where I live too, so we're not going to go there. Okay, I'll let oil run out. That's why I like to use castor oil. It's kind of nice and thick and it holds onto your parts better. We're going to oil the piston. Don't need to go crazy, but you want enough on there. Okay, so the tapered side of the rod faces in towards the crankshaft, and if you're careful, you can, without burning the crap out of yourself because your engine is still hot like mine is, you can slip these parts together like so. Beautiful. Okay, so there's our piston on our crankshaft. Next, we are going to install our sleeve. There is a notch in the top of the sleeve, which is right there. And there's a little pin or a little dowel rod thing in the top of the block itself. So we're going to go in with our sleeve. Nice, beautiful fit. This can be a bit of a tricky part, is trying to get the piston to line up with the sleeve. So sometimes it takes a minute to make sure that's no kind of goop in there. Sometimes it takes a minute to get everything to line up a little bit. And there we go, it lined up. Line everything up. Okay. Everything turns nice and free. There's no binding, there's no rough spots. I'll have to clean my engine after it's all covered in oil. Alright. Next, we are going to take our screws right here. The 4 long ones are cylinder head screws. We are going to hit those with some liquid wrench. You don't want to put steel screws into aluminum dry if you can help it, because that way it makes them a little bit easier to take out next time. We're going to install our cylinder head, which is right here, which is new old stock, brand new OS. We have a new head gasket, very important. Okay, so everything's turning free, nice and beautiful like it should be. Right, let's get on with it, shall we? I do have a new pinch bolt for the carburetor on the way. So we can, hang on a second here. Everything's just dripping with oil, but that's okay. It's an OS engine, they love oil, so it's alright. Idiots outside honking their horns. Okay. You want to fit your new head gasket. Oops, and mine just fell out because I wasn't paying attention. Fit your new head gasket like before. Like this. And put your cylinder head on your block. Look at that. Doesn't that look nice? Alright. Okay, so next we're going to need Allen keys. I believe it's a, let's see what we got here. I believe it's a 2.0 millimeter hex. I could be wrong, but let's find out. And yes, it is a 2 millimeter hex. And we're going to put our cylinder head screws in, one at a time, or just very carefully. And you don't want to tighten up one screw at a time. You want to tighten them all up evenly. So you want to go like, you know, kind of like little bits by little bits, if you get my drift. And put in our other one. Pretty sure you guys know what putting screws into an engine looks like, if you're watching my stuff. Or if you watch David's channel there. Another screw. The cylinder head takes a total of 4. They mostly do. These little small blocks. This is a 12, like I said before. There is also a 15 that looks like this, which I have in one of my other videos. Okay. So we're going to go just until they stop. Crisscross pattern. And I'm going to go across from each other. Never tighten one up all the way because you could end up screwing yourself over. And nice and snug. You don't want to go crazy tight, but you want to go snug. And then just chuck them again.